Hello, and thank you for joining me for another sermon recap. And this one is titled All Means All. And it is going to be coming from Romans chapter 8, and it's verses 28 through 30. And so the Apostle Paul wrote, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. For those God foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the likeness of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brothers. And those he predestined, he also called. Those he called, he also justified. Those he justified, he also glorified." And for this sermon, it's just one of those simple messages that sometimes can take a little bit to understand. Sometimes we have to go through some things. Sometimes we have to be more prayerful and allow God to reveal things according to His will and according to His timing, because His timing isn't always our timing. But to really be able to understand all means all, we have to understand that God doesn't have the same limitation of time that we do, that God created time, so he's outside of time. He gets to see our life before he even allowed our ancestors to live. So he has been seeing all the events that are going on right now. For us, it's current, but for God, this has already happened. He's already seen this. And he's seen all of the future, because all of the days of our lives are written down in his book. So he already knows how our life plays out. It's just that we get to live it out. We get to experience it in our own time for the first time. But it's also the reason why Paul could write this in Romans. And once we have experienced some things, once God has revealed some things, we can truly say all means all, that all things um, God works for the good of those who love him, because God does bless generations upon generations of those who love him, who fear him. And so we may not know the reason we're here today, but God has looked in our family tree, and someone or a lot of people have served him, have feared him, and he has spared the family tree. He has allowed the family tree to keep on going from generation to generation so that we could be here today. And that includes the sin that has happened. God has been very merciful, very gracious, very long suffering, because our family trees are not perfect. Even Jesus's family tree, if we go back and look at it, it's not perfect. There's a lot of sinners. Matter of fact, all of the people in Jesus's family tree are sinners, were sinners. And even because, God loved them, he spared them and he allowed Jesus to still come from their lineage. And so we don't know who's coming down the line in our lineage, because of the fear of God that we have, the love of God that we have, the choices that we've made to follow God and not to just follow the world or to follow our desires. So all means all. Sometimes it's not going to feel good, the things that we're going through. Sometimes we're not going to understand the things that we're going through. And it may not be that it's expressly going to make sense, even if we live to see several decades, or multiple more decades than we're alive right now. It may be something that God has to reveal later on, when we're with him in heaven. Um, but just know that all means all, that he will work all things out. Because Paul does say, those he predestined, he also called. Those he called, he also justified. And those he justified, he also glorified. So he's wanting us to be more and more like Jesus. And the main goal, the big goal, is to have that glory that Jesus has, because Jesus is the Son of God and he is sitting on the right hand of God the Father in his presence. And so for us, one day, that glory will be ours, is that we'll be a child of God and we'll be in his presence, and we'll never have to deal with the sin. We'll never have to deal with all the fallout of sin, because we will have been justified. We would have had Jesus' righteousness placed for us. because we didn't have any righteousness on our own. And then we'll be able to clearly understand with the understanding that he gives for all of us, being able to look back and see all of our history, and say that, yeah, God really did choose and use all, and work all things out for our good. And so we just want to take the time, regardless of where we are in our journey, wherever we are in life, whatever we're going through right now, and just to sit and think that if it wasn't for God's goodness, we wouldn't be here. And if we're here right now, it may be for someone else's benefit, but just allow God to work it out, because all means all. Amen.